In this video, we'll be talking about JavaScript functions. And in JavaScript, we have different types of function. We have arrow function, we have function as an expression, and we also have named function. We have callback functions, and we have anonymous functions. So we'll be taking a look at few of them. Later on, we can finish everything about functions. So I'm going to start with named function. So I will say function. So when you want to make a function, you first go with your function keyword followed by the name of the function. So the name of the function of this particular function, I'm going to call it greet. So it's going to be making a simple greeting for me. Now greet is the name of the function. I will provide a bracket and then a curly braces this way, and I'll hit enter. Now inside the curly braces, that's going to be where my logic that the function is going to execute will be. So you can say that's where your block of code that will get executed whenever the function is called will be. For instance, this function is just going to log a simple greeting at the terminal for us. I'll say console.log. I'll say good morning like this. Now, if I go to my terminal and then run this particular code like this, I don't get to see anything. Now, that's because I have not really called my function. So don't forget, anytime you make a function, don't forget to call the function. How do you then call a function? You call a function simply by the function name like this, and also put your bracket and then end with a semicolon. Now, if we go back here and run this particular code, you can see good morning has been logged. So that's that. So I can also make another function that is going to calculate, just make a simple sum of two different numbers. So I can just say function, I'm going to give it a name, sum, followed by a bracket and then a curly braces. Now inside this function, I can also declare variables like let x equal to 10, let y equals to 12, and I can then say let c equal to x plus what? Y, and I can now log the value of c. Console.log what? Will now put the variable c. Now, if we go to the browser, if we go to the terminal and execute this, we are getting nothing. That's because this function has not been called. So we just need to call the function by the name. So we'll now call it by the name, which is sum, this way. And then we run this, we get 22. Hope that's clear. So functions can take what we call parameters and arguments, because this particular bracket here and the one we provide when the function is being called, they are not just here for fancy. They are not there for fancy. So they can actually take in things. Now say we want this particular function to be so dynamic, in the sense that we give it something to work with, and then it processes it and then give us a feedback. Why is that even important? That's important because functions should, perform different tasks based on what we give them. Now, for instance, now, say I call this function twice or thrice, 3 times, and then log go to my terminal this way, I will get 22 3 times. Now, what if I just want to get different values? I just want to give this function maybe separate values to work with, then to give me different answers, something like that. So what I can now do is then provide parameters and then give an argument that the function we use to work. So I'm going to comment on this particular part, but we're going to reference it later this way. So I'm just going to bring this down a little bit, and then I'm going to declare another function called sum. Let sum, sorry about that, should be function. Function will now say sum like this. So in this particular place, in this bracket, I'm going to provide a comma b comma c like this. So I'm going to say c equal to a plus b like this. And I can put this, because I want it to log this thing for me, I can cut and say console.log, then paste back this particular thing. No, this is not actually right. This is totally wrong. So let me just review this a bit. I can say c equal to a plus b like this. I can now say console.log what c rather like this. Now a, b, c here are called what? Parameters. Now when I go to call my function sum this way, I now need to provide argument for a and argument for b, because in this case c is just the sum of a and b, so there's no need providing an argument for it. So what do I mean by argument? Argument will now be the actual value of a and the actual value of b. So in this case, my a could be 5 and my b 10. It can be higher, it can be lesser. We'll end with a semicolon, and then when we now go back to our terminal and then run back the code, we get 15. We get 15 here. Hope you can see that. So this is what just parameters and then arguments are in a nutshell. No complex thing, just this. And then let's take this a little bit further. Now say we want to give this function now different numbers to work with to give us different outputs. So what can I do? Say I call this function multiple places. Now switch this to maybe 1. Now leave this as maybe 3. Change this to 12, and then leave this as 5. So I'm expecting this to give me 15, 4, and what? 17. So now let's check the outcome of this code. That's it right there. So the first place we called the function, it gave us 15. And the second place we called this function, it gave us 14, sorry, 4. And then the last place we called the sum function, it gave us what? 17. So basically, that's just what a function does. A function sometimes can take parameter which we have seen now. So now let's now explain the concept of these parameters, because from what we have up here, we declared these variables with a keyword let, but in this particular case, we didn't declare these parameters. Now, actually, what happens is parameters, you don't just get to declare them. So when you put parameters, they are now available as values inside that particular function. So now this A, B, C, they are now available to be used as variable within our function scope. That's why we didn't get to do let or anything related to declaring a variable, because when you provide a parameter to a function, those parameters are now available to be used as variables within that particular function. Hope it does make sense. And then we can now work with them as normal variable. For instance, let's make a function that is going to maybe say welcome and then attach somebody's name. So for instance, I can say function, I'll um say I'll say name. Say name is just a random name for this variable. I can pass name, somebody's name, as a parameter here, and I'm going to say console.log something for me. I can say this name dot to uppercase like this. So what I'm just doing here is I just want to demonstrate to you that parameters can take any data type as a value. Now here, these are parameters and they took numbers as what? As arguments. Now in this case, I'm going to provide a string for the name and then convert it to capital letter using this to uppercase string method. So when I call my function say name, I'll then pass name to it, goodness, this way. And when I run this particular function, I have goodness in capital letter. So why did I get goodness in capital letter? That's because of this particular line. To uppercase, convert lowercase letters to uppercase letters. So name here is now what? Goodness. And then I now use, since name is now goodness and it is a string, I can now use the string method called uppercase to make it capitalized. So now I also want us to take a look at something. Now, when you provide a parameter and then you don't get to provide an argument, definitely it throws an error. What do I mean? Say I get rid of this goodness here and then try to run my code. on the terminal again, obviously I'm getting an error. You can see it's telling me cannot read the properties of undefined uppercase. Maybe that's because of the uppercase, you think. So now let's get rid of this uppercase first and then try to run the code again. It was not really because of the uppercase. It was because I should have provided an argument for this name parameter here. As you can see, it's returning undefined. So assuming you forgot to provide an argument for a particular parameter, just know that it's going to throw an error undefined. And that's undefined because we've declared um because we're not like saying something like we're not like saying something like, let's say we are logging something like console.log, we now see f name. So f name, for instance, is going to be first name. So now I'm logging first name inside here as a variable, but then in my code there's nowhere f name was defined. So when I run this code, it's going to tell me that f name is not defined or scatter my whole code for me. If I check down, you can see f name is not actually defined. So that's the same thing that happened in the case of name. That's because this name has not been defined. That's because we've not yet provided an argument for it. I hope you understand. So I'll just get rid of this particular line. And then, so it's always a safe measure to make something they call a default value. So now this thing is now going to check if we don't provide an argument for name, it's now going to settle with this particular value I provided for it. So in this case, when I run this my function back, other than giving me undefined, it's now going to give me guests. It's now going to use guests as a default parameter, as a default argument for name if the actual name is not provided. Hope you understand what I'm saying. So when I run this code again, it gives me guest other than saying undefined. So it's just a better way to avoid errors. So even when I come back here again to provide a value, maybe Victoria, like this, and then run this code again, what do you think it's gonna give me? If you say guests, you're actually wrong because it's not gonna give me guest because it's gonna give me Victoria because I have not provided an argument for name. So when I run this again, it gives us Victoria. So that's just that. So this is just a safe thing to do if your parameter could be 0 or maybe if there won't be any argument for the parameter. So this is just a way to avoid unnecessary errors. Now, let me show you one more thing. Now, say we are doing computation where I'm adding and minusing informations, variables, like if I come over here and then um, I don't get to provide the second argument for this particular for the two functions up, and I run my code like this, you can see I get not a number, not a number, like this. That's because the function is expecting me to provide two arguments for A and for B. And then in this case, I've provided just for A. So I cannot just say I cannot just do 5 plus undefined. You see, that's why it's giving me not a number. So a number plus undefined is going to give you not a number. where am I even getting undefined from? I'm getting undefined from B, because B here has been declared, but then no value was given to it. So in order for me to avoid this kind of errors, I can now provide this with a default value of 0, like this. So when we now go back to run this code, other than giving us not a number, it's going to give us 5 and 1, because 5 plus the default value, which is 0, is what? 5. 1 plus the default 0, which is here, is what? 1. So other than giving us this error, it gives us 5 and 1. So guys, if you really like this video, I would really want you to share and also like, and then follow if you've not yet followed, for further JavaScript lessons. Bye.